Serious? What is your most terrifying? We need to leave. Now. Random rush of fear you felt. My car was stolen the very night I moved into my new house in a very good neighborhood. The neighbors had warned us that the neighborhood was being targeted at the time. They mentioned a woman around the corner that opened the door for knockers in the middle of the night and they attacked her and robbed her and almost killed her. We had reported the car stolen and did the police reports when it happened. Well, 2 nights later in the middle of the night I hear a knock on the door and they said open up, it's the police. Well, since I had heard the story about the other lady, I was suspicious and did not answer. I grabbed my kids and put them in my daughter's room because it had access to the roof from the window. I called the police to say that 2 men claiming to be police are pounding on my door. They said there was no police in the area and they're sending a car. Turns out, these same guys stole the car and came back for seconds. I did get my car back because they brought it with. How nice of them. Hope they brought it back with a full tank of gas too. Years ago my BF owned a truck tire repair company. He stopped by a customer's house unannounced one day to try to get a check, as they owed a lot of money. When he came out of the house he was pretty shaken up. He explained the man's numerous other brothers were there. Unusual. Everyone was very jittery but they cut him a check and then rushed him out. He had a scary feeling that day. 2 days later that customer and his brothers were arrested for a murder that they had committed the night before we stopped by. When I was hiking in the woods and I saw a baby bear, I slowly turned and walked quickly away from the bear. Because I'm not getting eaten, I had to drag my friend along with me because he didn't understand why we needed to return the way we came from. You won't get eaten, but mama will make sure you're good and dead. A baby bear is probably the most dangerous thing you can come across in the woods. I remember when I was with my nanny once and we were driving down the mountain she lived on. A baby bear waltzed out onto the road and stopped to just stare at us. She hit her brakes and just sat there. It was like a good 5 minutes wait but the cub finally moved on but she didn't move. I asked her why and she pointed out of my side of the window because of that and I looked over to see big ol' mama bear meandering along after the cub. She was terrifying but at least we were in the car so we could make a quick getaway if we needed to. Was riding my bike home from a friend's house when I was a young teen. Over 20 years ago, we had both lost track of time so it was dusk when I left. Lived about a mile away. Was traveling down one of the last roads to get home when I had this weird feeling. So I turned around to look back down the road. Saw headlights pass, stop, back up and turn on the road I was on. It was a pretty long road without many houses and no street lights or anything. As soon as they turned I bolted into the woods and hid pretty far in. The car slowly drove by and kept going. No idea what they were doing but I didn't want anything to do with it. This happened to me too. A van kept driving slightly in front of me and stopping so I'd have to pass by. Then waited in a car park at the other side of a lane I had to pass down for me to come out the other side. I could see the guy looking about for me from where I was hiding. Something similar happened to me when I was 16. The guy asked for directions. I was so relieved until I realized he was jacking off and trying to get me and my 9-year-old sister to see. I grabbed her hand and told her to run. She didn't know what was going on. Thank goodness. I had a similar experience. Back in college, I went out drinking in the city center. When the bar closed I decided to walk home alone. My bicycle was stolen and my friends didn't live near me. The walk home from the center to my house takes about 30 to 40 minutes. So drunk me is walking alone on a calm, straight road. On my left is a forest park area and on my right is the road. I just passed the roundabout when a car with loud music comes up ahead. When it is next to me, the car stops and the door to the passenger seat is thrown open. Some weird guys in the car are telling me to get in. Me in my drunk state yelled back that they should go F themselves. They close the door and drive further. Dart until I hear they're not. I hear their car going fully around the roundabout so they're back in the direction I'm walking. I quickly jump into the forest park area and hide in the bushes. I see the same car slowly drive by where I just walked. Once I couldn't see them anymore I jumped out of the bushes. I sometimes wonder what would have happened to me if I didn't hide in those bushes. Hurricane Florence a year ago. We planned to ride it out as we were on a hill and in an area where the winds wouldn't be bad. Mostly ignored the news. The night before, I got this huge pit of fear in my stomach and begged my dad for us to go stay with my sister a few hours inland. He fought with me about it but I finally convinced him. We came back a week later to find a tree fallen into our house, the house full of water. A tornado formed in the woods behind the house and pushed the tree up a 45-degree slope into our roof and through our house. Now, I will always trust my gut feeling, no matter how stupid it seems. A hurricane and a tornado? Man, yeah, hurricanes spawn tornadoes pretty frequently. I don't know the science of it, but I know during Dorian earlier this year there were tornado warning sightings all over the Carolinas. I was walking in my old local park with my sister. We entered it at about 3 p.m. and were hanging around until at about 9:30 we saw 3 people all wearing somewhat similar outfits all the way on the other side of the park. I immediately noticed but don't think much of it. We walk for about 2 more minutes and I notice one of them stopped and was staring at us. I immediately had a bad feeling and told my sister we should leave. She noticed and obliged. Later that night there was word of a stabbing in the park and the suspects were all the people we saw in the group of 3. I was camping with a friend in a backwoods camping area. Not very many sites and they were all super spaced out. We had already been there one night, had the site fully set up. We had been hiking all day, the works. We drove into town to get some food. And when we were driving back to our secluded campsite we passed a man walking out of the only road to our site. We both locked eyes with him and I got a super creeped out feeling. He stared at us like he knew us and hated us, but we had never seen him in our lives. When we got to our tent we went inside and everything we had in there was tossed. Our bags were dumped out and our clothes were thrown everywhere. We quickly realized both our hunting knives were gone, along with a bunch of our clothes. We also realized it had to be that guy we saw. There were no other sites or hiking paths he could have been walking from besides ours. We jumped in the car and drove back towards where we had seen him. He was gone. We drove a bit further and found a common area where other campers were gathered. We sprinted down and asked, have any of you seen this guy? And described him. The people at the gathering just stared at us and didn't speak, giving us an even more creeped out feeling. It was at that point that I told my friend we need to leave this place right now. Walking back to our car we looked over the edge of a guardrail and saw all our stolen clothes in the woods. We gathered them up but didn't find either of our knives. Knowing this guy was still out there with those knives and that no one around us cared freaked us out so much. We packed the car up and ended our camping trip early. No way were we staying out in those woods one more night. This is what kind of common sense I am internally screaming every time I see a scary film about camping. Mind you, the ritual is actually pretty decent. There are people who live in the backwoods who believe that it is their place, and get super territorial. They aren't generally well-adjusted people. He looked like he had been living in the woods. I wouldn't be surprised if he lived back in there and had been watching us that day. This is one of the reasons tent camping makes me nervous. It's too damn easy to murdered by someone when the only thing separating you from them is a tent. My husband doesn't share my skepticism about camping because he thinks the kind of people who camp are unlikely to murder us, but I just think you never know who's out there with you. Was once at summer camp and was walking to the beach. It's like a 5-minute walk from the cabins we were staying in, and the path to get there is made of sand and surrounded by trees. We were supposed to go in partners but mine dipped. Anyways, I was walking for probably about 2 minutes and I hear leaves crunching in the trees beside me. So I look over and what I see is none other than a brown bear cub lugging a tree. I think that everyone knows that where there's a cub, there's a mama. This bear starts making bear noises. I just about shat my pants and bolted out of there. Ate it. Thank you for my first silver kind stranger. Never in my 14 age of redditing have I been shown such kindness. Drinking at a bar with some mates. In Sydney, 2 young guys walked past, and I happened to make eye contact. He flashed a gun at me and nodded towards the door. I didn't make him ask twice. I was walking by a long stretch of road with no houses. There was a cemetery. A van with 2 guys in it stopped to ask me if I needed a ride. This was in the late 90s, so it's not like hitchhiking was legal. I'm all, no thanks. I'm nearly home. They wouldn't budge. They kept following me with the windows down. Kept saying see Monday. Just get in. At some point they just stop, and they start getting out. I was just a teen, and they were clearly 20 something. I just took off running. I must have sprinted half a mile to get to an alley, and hid by the nearest building near the road. I waited about 15 minutes before moving on to make sure they had given up. so they wouldn't follow me home. Late 90s, early 20s too. I used to hitchhike in the evenings. The walk home was long if I missed the last bus. I usually got a lift of middle-aged person, or a truck driver when hitching. One night though some young guys picked me up. I got a weird vibe off them, and they had me sitting in the middle backseat, so I couldn't just jump if things got hairy. They were talking about using party dogs like Speed, so I started talking about my dog use and how I was shitting myself that I could have hep C. Data block later they said they were turning off, and this was as close as they could get me to home. I breathed a sigh of relief. I was at a party my freshman year of college and some seedy people were present. The night was getting very tense, but no fights or anything happened. As the night went on it became very clear to me something was going to happen. I told my friend it was time to leave. No more than 5 minutes after we left someone was stabbed and the stabber was shot. I was at a national park on vacation. The layout was kinda like a crater with a room you can walk under almost all the way around. Had this major gut feeling of yeah not going down there. Later that day a lady was killed from kids throwing large rocks tree branches into the opening. When I was a preteen a strange man stopped and asked me for directions that didn't make sense. As I'm trying to help him a van rolls up and the side door opens. I just booked it and never looked back. Damn. I had a similar experience when I was 14. I was walking home from school when a creepy older guy pulled over his work van, got out, was asking me for directions to a well-known local place, and feigning like he didn't understand what I was saying, in an obvious attempt to draw out the conversation. So that alone set off alarm bells in my head, but then he kept looking around the whole time, and I knew he was about to try something. Some lady happened to be walking from her house to her car so I yelled out, "Hey mom, can you come here and help give this guy directions?" Surprisingly, the lady actually came over and she did. She yelled something like, "Your father and your big brothers will be out in a minute. Are you ready to go?" He looked panicked, quickly got back into his car and took off. Once he left, that lady told me she knew what was up and made sure I was okay, before letting me use her phone to call the cops. Turns out I wasn't the only girl he tried to lure abduct. My faith in humanity was both damaged and restored that day. Definitely when my town got hit with the worst firestorm we've ever had in 2017. Thomas Fire. We knew there was a fire somewhere, maybe another town. We weren't too worried. The power is beginning to go spotty, and the winds are howling outside. Then my roommate gets a call from a friend on the other side of town. "My house is on fire. You guys need to pack a bag." After the call was over the power went out and stayed out, so we packed our bags. And I start to hear little plinks against the roof, almost like rain, but it isn't rain, it's just ash. Not 15 minutes had gone by, and I look outside. We lived by a large hill only 2 blocks away, and it was burning. It got there so fast. I got back inside and tell my roommates we have to leave right away. This is when our neighbors started waking out too. We had to then capture our 3 very scared and confused cats. It was so crazy to drive away and see only blackness ahead of you, but in your rearview mirror only flames. Our neighborhood home ended up being spared. However, many of my friends who lived closer to the mountains were not so lucky. I can't imagine the fear. My son was stationed at Pendleton for several years, and I worried about him and his little family every time a fire broke out. They are on the East Coast now, so I get to worry about hurricanes lol.